The anime begins with our protagonist, who, for now, does not have a name. He appears frustrated, since the servers of the game he used to play have just been shut down. As someone who spent at least 10 years immersed in the world of games, he decides to act logically, like any gamer would, and chooses to search the internet for a truly difficult game. During the search, he comes across a strange page. Upon opening it and analyzing the options, he notices a mode called Inferno, described as so cruel that there would not even be time to cry. That catches his attention. Observing the huge difference in difficulty between the classes, he chooses the Summoner, which was considered even harder than the Demon King himself. However, for this class, it would be necessary to start as a simple deer and then undergo a test. He finds it strange, but ends up thinking that he should accept it. Curious, he agrees and clicks the option. Next, he is transported to another world, where he practically is reborn. His new parents give him the name Alan. We then discover that, to level up in that mode, it would be necessary to gain 100 times more experience than in normal mode. In addition, there was no time limit, and if he managed to escape that inferno, he would certainly uncover the secrets of that world. Thus, time passes, and we learn that, in his previous life, his real name was Kenichi Yamada, a 35-year-old man, unemployed, single, and without a social life. Now, with only 1 year of age, having reincarnated in that world had saved his life. He feels grateful because, despite still being unable to speak, he understands everything perfectly, since everything is automatically translated for him. As the game itself indicated, he would begin as a serf. His family works cultivating deforested land to pay taxes to the lord of those lands. His mother is named Teresia, and his father, Laudum. Both appear to be around 20 years old and show great love and affection for him. Alan pretends to be tired so that they put him to sleep, and when he is alone, he tries to open his status window. However, nothing happens. He has been trying since he arrived in that world, but without success. Even enjoying the comfortable life he leads, always in his mother's arms and with clean diapers, he is still a summoner and wants to test magic. Suddenly, something finally works, and a book appears before him. However, any sudden movement makes noise and could draw attention. Fortunately, the book soon disappears, and he pretends to be sleeping again. His parents, more at ease, leave him alone once more. He takes advantage of the moment to try to access the Summoning Guild. There, he confirms that his class is indeed Summoner. Although his statistics are very low, he understands that he will need a lot of experience to become stronger, and that the more he uses summons, the faster he will evolve. For now, he can only summon insects and small animals, which he finds curious. His rank is H. The book shines, and a message from the god of that world appears, apologizing for not having sent the grimoire earlier, explaining that the class was still in testing. It would no longer be possible to change anything, as that was the signature of the goddess of creation. Alan understands the situation and is not bothered by it. Now, he just wants to see his summoning in action. He tries, but does not succeed immediately. There is no internet there, so he realizes that he will have to find solutions on his own. He imagines that he will first need to create an insect and then summon it. Excited, he tries again, but ends up making noise, which makes his mother peek in. Luckily, she does not notice anything strange. Alan takes a nap and decides to rest, lamenting the fact that a 1-year-old baby does not have much energy. The next day, while his mother takes care of the house and his father works, he takes advantage of nap time to try again. This time, he manages to summon a grasshopper, but does not pay much attention to it. He registers the summon in the guild and notices that the rank H insect has no name. He then decides to call it Denka. Below that, blessings appear that increase the grasshopper's speed and endurance. Alan is surprised to realize that his own statistics have also increased. However, the noise draws attention, and his mother enters the room. Quickly, he sends Denka back to the other world. Thus, the days pass, and Alan continues testing his summoning magic. He gains a new companion, a mouse named Shorasuk, who begins to spy for him, even though it has little intelligence. At the moment, Alan can store up to 10 summons, depending on the blessings of the monsters he keeps. His statistics increase. By storing 10 Shorasuk, his strength rises by more than 10 points, making him stronger than children of the same age. leveling up would unlock several abilities. But since it is 100 times harder, he begins to regret it, thinking that he may never be able to finish it. At that moment, his father arrives home, and Teresa is startled to see him looking like that. Even as he asks them not to worry, he explains that he hunted a boar. He asks if Alan wants to see it, and the boy responds excitedly, since he wants to see the first monster of that world. As they walk to the location, Laudum points to migratory birds heading north, explaining that they announce autumn. He says that Alan's name was inspired by those monsters, which can go anywhere, flying freely to the ends of the world. He comments, laughing, that the mother got angry because he chose a name inspired by monsters. When they arrive with the boar, Alan is impressed by its size. Gelda announces that the hero of the day has arrived, and Laudum asks her not to exaggerate, introducing Alan to her son, who is surprised to see him talking at only 1-year-old. Alan asks if the boar was strong, and Gelda explains that it took 20 people to defeat it, since it was a rank C monster. 10 months pass, and Alan finally reaches level 2 as a summoner. Now, he can create rank G summons and even synthesize them. His storage space increases, and he gains a kind of memo where he keeps information and thoughts. Excited, he wants to try synthesis, but since he still does not have enough mana, he decides to eat, recover energy, and then test it quickly. Even so, he continues completely without mana. Still, Alan does not think about giving up. If he cannot perform monster synthesis, he decides to try creating a rank G1, but fails again for the same reason: lack of mana. With no other alternatives at that moment, the only option left is to go to sleep. Time continues to pass, and now at 3 years of age, Alan still remains at level 2 of creation. Up to that point, he has managed to use synthesis only about 20 times. In one of these attempts, he mixes monsters and ends up creating a new rank G bird, with varied geographical distribution, which receives the name Chatpi. This creature has the ability to imitate sounds, which can be extremely useful to confuse enemies through voice. Next, he removes from storage Pianta, a frog with the ability to provoke opponents, functioning as an excellent lure. After that, he calls Mogusuk, a mole capable of digging tunnels, something very useful for traps and escapes. Alan becomes excited, because rank G summons are truly effective, and whoever masters the statistics of their summons can almost evolve on their own. Even so, when he ends up falling into one of Mogusuk's tunnels, he laments, realizing that he still has a long way to go before being able to face real monsters. At that moment, he remembers that it is already 3 in the afternoon, and that Kirina should arrive at any instant. And, as expected, she appears right after, calling him to play. Kirina is the neighbor's daughter and the same girl who usually beats him up while they play knights. Alan wonders where so much strength comes from, until he remembers the bonuses received because of his summons. Sometime later, we discover that Teresa is pregnant again. She asks Kirina to return home quickly, because it was getting late. The girl obeys, says goodbye, while Alan is left sprawled on the ground, completely exhausted. Shortly after, during dinner, Alan tells his father that he intends to help him. Since his mother's belly is getting bigger and bigger, his parents are surprised by that. Alan realizes that, even without using summons, his strength is already approaching that of an adult. Still, they reply that it is best for him to continue playing with Kirina, since he is still just a child, and that the day will come when he will need to help in the fields. Alan agrees, acknowledging that they are right. Since it is almost impossible to remove the serf status, he feels that he spoke prematurely and decides to keep playing for now. The parents then ask why he has been spending so much time throwing red cards against a tree. Alan answers that he had already explained before. If monsters appear near the house, he wants to be able to protect his mother. His father is moved upon hearing this, although, in truth, Alan was only testing whether he could unlock other abilities. At that point, Laudum comments that he is looking forward to the evaluation ritual, which happens when children turn 5 years old, the moment when the god of that world evaluates what gifts they possess and whether they are considered valuable. Depending on the gift, it might even be possible to escape life in the fields. Time passes once again, and when winter arrives, Alan thinks about returning to train his summons. However, Kirina appears and drags him to train with the sword, or rather, to get beaten again. His father arrives and mocks the situation. Then, his mother is startled upon seeing Denka and ends up falling to the ground. Alan acts quickly and hides the summon, but soon realizes that labor has begun. He helps by heating the water and warns his father, who becomes confused with everything happening at the same time. Fortunately, Matilda, Kirina's mother, arrives along with Gelda and her daughter. Matilda warns that the men need to leave and are expelled from the house. She takes control of the childbirth, and, at dawn, everyone wakes up to the baby's crying. Upon entering the room, Teresia tells Laudum that it is a boy. When they ask what name he wants to give the child, he chooses Masu. Teresia likes the name, but asks if he was also inspired by some monster. Laudum stands up angrily, but, to his surprise, Teresia simply laughs. Meanwhile, Alan wonders why he reincarnated in that world. He really wanted an extremely difficult game, something that demanded all his strength. His previous life was empty. No money, no diploma, no girlfriend. Nothing besides the desire to become stronger in a game, or at least that was the plan. His mother asks him to come closer, and upon touching his younger brother, Alan begins to cry. Teresia tells him not to worry, while Alan thinks that he still does not know how he will do it, but promises himself that he will free his parents from the serf status and take care of everything. As soon as Alan turns 5 years old, the moment of the evaluation ceremony arrives. On the way there, he asks his father how it works. Raiden explains that it is a special event in which everyone, from servants to nobles, must participate once they reach the age of 5. If they demonstrate any kind of talent, they can be freed from servitude. The only drawback is that there are many competitors. Since they settled in that land, people have been having children one after another, and now there are many children about to turn 5 years old, just like him. When Raiden finishes explaining, Krina, excited, asks if they will go together to the evaluation ceremony. Some time later, Krina shows her excitement upon arriving at the commoner's village and comments that if she is evaluated as a Chinese swordsman, she will become a knight. Alan looks at the people around him and realizes that some are very well dressed. He wonders if they are really commoners. Even so, it is surprising to see everyone participating in the ceremony at the same time. It is evident that some children are dressed better than others, something even a child can notice. As they walk, some people make comments about Alan's appearance, saying that he must be a servant because of his dark hair and eyes. Finally, 3 priests come out of the church before the ceremony begins and declare that me, the god of creation, blesses everyone equally with great opportunities. The country has already seen heroes whose lineage can be traced back to servitude. As examples, they mention Classy's Santa, who was born a commoner, and Durf, the Lord of the Sword, who also had humble origins. Alan remembers that, in the game, classes such as Hero or Lord of the Sword could only be obtained by people from lower social classes. That seemed to be just a game setting, but it clearly applied to that world. This explains why everyone, from the top to the bottom, needs to go through the ceremony. Everyone enters the evaluation site and observes the statues of the gods worshipped in that world. Alan recognizes the central statue as me, the god of creation, the same entity who sent him the letter. When the ceremony begins, the priests announce that they will start with the village chief's son, Boji Palomas. They ask him to place his hand on the crystal ball and explain that any talent or attribute will be recorded on the metal plate behind him. The boy follows the instructions, and as soon as he touches the crystal ball, his statistics appear on the plate. Alan realizes that it is very similar to the status screen of his grimoire. The boy shows talent as a merchant, which makes his father extremely happy. He hugs him proudly and even cries with emotion. Alan realizes that having any talent at all is already a reason for celebration. The information is displayed with rankings instead of numbers, and Alan confirms this by checking his grimoire, satisfied to know that no one besides him can see it. As the ceremony continues, Alan learns that not everyone has talent, which makes it even more valuable to obtain one. Next, a boy named Doroga steps forward and reveals talent as an axe user. Alan is surprised, as it is the first A-rank talent to appear. This indicates that it is possible to reach high positions without belonging to the nobility. When almost everyone has already been evaluated, it is Krina's turn. She runs excitedly toward the crystal ball, curious to discover her talent. As soon as she touches the object, it begins to shine intensely, leaving everyone speechless. Those present are shocked as they witness the miracle. Krina possesses the talent of Lord of the Sword, one of the rarest and most powerful that exist. The guard proudly announces that his daughter has obtained the best possible talent. However, Krina feels a little disappointed because she wanted to be a Chinese swordsman. For Alan, however, this is no surprise, since that talent explains just how absurdly strong she is. Finally, it is Alan's turn. His parents wait anxiously to discover what his talent is. When he places his hand on the crystal ball, the glow is even more intense than before. Raiden immediately approaches to check if everything is all right, and Alan comments that Krina had already caused something even more impressive. When they try to read the plate, Raiden explains to the priest that they cannot read and asks him to inform them of Alan's talent. The priest agrees, but all the excitement disappears when he states that Alan has no talent at all. For a moment, Alan almost panics, but soon realizes that something is wrong. He carefully observes the metal plate and notices that, in the space where the talent should appear, there is only a writing error. This irritates him because it is clearly a bug. He even ends up blaming the god of creation, thinking that he should learn to balance the game better, since now no one will know that he is a summoner. Even so, Raiden takes Alan back home, where his mother is waiting. During dinner, his father says that talent is not everything, and that, regardless of that, Alan will always be his pride. Teresa agrees, and Alan realizes that, despite being very poor and not even having a bathtub, he is happy to have been born into that family. At night, Alan consults his grimoire and realizes that all of his attributes are extremely high. He understands, then, at least one thing: he is the only one in that world who is playing on Hell mode. All the children at the ceremony were 5 years old, which means they should be at the same level. However, the ranking system likely reflects the expected growth at each level. That would explain why everyone has E-rank attributes, while progress in Hell mode amounts to only 1/100th of the normal rate. Considering these intervals, the displayed values represent only a fraction of the real ones, making ordinary people much weaker than they appear. He was pulling his hair out or yanking it, imagining this somewhere far above. But reality came crashing down to put an end to mediocre games in his place. Now, his time would be spent proving that hardcore mode is amazing. He is 30 years old, so it is normal to think that way. Even so, that strange detail in the evaluation ceremony was clearly an error, and the developers would need to fix it. Because of that, he would certainly complain and drown them in a sea of letters. After all, they could not underestimate a player who had no life. Time passes, and one day Alan notices that his father is behaving in a strange way. That, by itself, would not be so unusual, but this time it was different, more worrying. It was not just his usual odd behavior, but something abnormal even for him. His mother comments that he had been like that ever since he arrived home late the previous night. Shortly afterward, they go to Gerda's house to celebrate the fact that Krina is now a Lady of the Sword. Upon arriving there, Krina excitedly tells Alan that the talent of Lord of the Sword is even better than that of Chinese Sword, so now she will become even stronger. Alan pretends to be surprised, saying that he cannot believe it, even though he already knew. He comments that, even before that, she already defeated him effortlessly, because she was just that strong. Matilda mentions that the village chief stopped by and left a bottle of alcohol to celebrate, allowing them to open it. However, Rodden maintains a resentful attitude as he congratulates them, saying that they can enjoy the alcohol. Gerda responds in the same way, stating that in that house the guests drink first. Alan begins to wonder if his father feels jealous of Krina's talent, but soon dismisses that idea, since Rodden is not like that. There must be another reason. Rodden tries to serve the first cup, but Gerda says that she will not drink anything if he keeps that bitter expression. She asks him to stop ruining the mood. Suddenly, Rodden smashes the bottle on the floor and says that he is happy that Krina has an incredible talent, something that truly deserves to be celebrated. Then, Gerda asks why he said that he would cut ties with the family. This revelation leaves everyone in shock. Rodden explains that it is not because he wants to, but because Krina's talent is extraordinary. She will be able to join the cavalry to serve the country, and there is even the possibility that she may become a noble. People like that should not waste time socializing with servants. At that moment, Alan realizes that his father was trying to do a favor that no one asked for. Rodden insists that being a lady of the sword is something very important, but Gerda coldly replies that it makes no difference. Tired of the argument, Alan asks Krina to intervene, believing that this might calm them down. Krina immediately draws her wooden sword, ready to act. But before she can do anything, Matilda and Teresa take control of the situation. The contrast between the personalities of the two women becomes clear. Teresa merely pinches her husband's cheeks in a controlled manner, while Matilda simply beats him up, resembling a scene from The Incredibles, where the characters fight during dinner. After everyone finally calms down, Alan asks Matilda if they were always like that. She replies that parenthood made them a little calmer, because before that they would trade punches without thinking twice. Teresa smiles as she reminisces about the old days and says that, in fact, the four of them are childhood friends and grew up together in the same village. Matilda explains that, about 10 years ago, a rumor began to spread that a new village would be founded, and they decided to participate in the project together. They talked as a group about working side by side to build their own houses, which explains why both have the same design. Rodden comments that, with more people, it was easier to build two houses at the same time, considering the labor and the materials. Gerda adds that she was the one who raised the support beams, while Rodden was responsible for the walls and the floors. Then, she continues pouring the drink and says that she also took care of the roof. In short, Rodden mentions that he has not drunk sake since the day of the wedding, and Gerda says that the same goes for her. Both Rodden and Gerda usually feel sick after drinking, but the next day they continue working as usual. The following morning, someone informs Gerda that the Order of Knights has arrived to see Krina. Shortly afterward, Rodden and Gerda head to the commoner's village with their children, while many other people gather around to watch. Alan comments that it seems the news that Krina is a lady of the sword has already spread. Suddenly, Daroga approaches Krina and Alan. Alan recognizes him as the boy from the evaluation ceremony. He is already displaying his talent as an axe user, holding a large haft. Daroga asks what Alan is doing there and says that talentless losers have no place in that location. Before Alan can respond, Kino steps forward to defend him, stating that he is there because he is strong. Daroga does not believe it and reminds him of Alan's rankings, mocking him. Ken tries to attack him, but his father quickly holds him back to restrain him. The village chief then announces that the Order of Knights has arrived and asks everyone to make way. Everyone recognizes the captain, a master swordsman named Zenoff. Krina becomes extremely excited to finally see real knights. 3 years have passed since she and Alan used to play at being knights, and now she sees them for real. Krina enthusiastically introduces herself to the captain. Alan asks if she will now leave the village to become a knight. Gerda quickly explains to Zenoff that her daughter is only 5 years old and has never wielded a real sword, so she would have no chance at all. Zenoff does not see that as a problem, because in the end, she is still a lady of the sword. The only problem would be if everything were a lie to deceive the man named Grainel. Gerda nervously denies it, and then Zenoff turns to the vice captain, allowing no protest. The captain realizes that something is wrong, and Zenoff warns them that falsifying the results of the evaluation ceremony is punishable by death. Therefore, they need to confirm whether Krina's talent as a lady of the sword is legitimate. To do that, a fencing duel will be held. Gerda begs for mercy, as her daughter's life is at risk, but Zenoff states that if she does not fight, she will be executed along with the entire family at the lake. Alan did not expect something so extreme and wonders if those people have completely lost their minds. Everyone around them becomes tense and worried. However, the moment Krina sees a real sword for the first time, She immediately runs toward it and asks if she can use it. Krina accepts the challenge and faces Leberand, the vice captain of the knights, surprising everyone by wielding a massive sword with great precision. Even though she is only a child, she withstands the attacks of an experienced adult, causing despair in her parents and indignation in Alan as he watches the excessive force being used against her. After being thrown against the wall, Krina gets back up and releases an intense pressure, revealing a special ability that makes her superior to Leberand. With a final strike, she splits the vice captain's sword in half, proving that she could have killed him. The duel comes to an end, and Leberand acknowledges his defeat, praising Krina's strength. The crowd applauds, and there is no longer any doubt that she is a true lady of the sword. Zinnov accepts the result, apologizes for his previous attitude, and congratulates Gerda on raising such a daughter. Later on, everyone gathers for a dinner, where Zinnov introduces himself as the captain of the knights and explains that he was sent to confirm the existence of a Lord of the Sword in the region. Impressed, he reveals that the village will be renamed in honor of Krina and asks Gerda to continue training her daughter, so that, in the future, she can study at the academy and serve the royal family. During the dinner, Rodden also receives recognition for his work as a hunter, and the episode ends on a light note, with family moments and a relaxed atmosphere. Sometime later, Alan celebrates the fact that, thanks to recent events, he has finally managed to improve his summoning skill. He immediately opens the grimoire and, upon checking the statistics, realizes that he now possesses the enhanced version of the skill, which means that his summons can become more powerful. In addition, F-rank creatures have been unlocked, something he already expected, although he still needs to work with them to obtain new ones, just as he did with Chappie. Alan becomes excited to discover what the next unlocked type will be and truly hopes that it will be something intimidating, such as a dragon. To make things even better, his card stock increased from 20 to 30, which means that he will be able to receive 1.5 times more additional enhancements. A full 2 years have passed since the last time his summoning skill leveled up, so he knows that he will still have to experience many things from now on. At night, Alan offers to wash the dishes, since Teresa is expecting another baby. In this marriage, they do not waste time, and he knows that his wife needs to rest. In truth, Alan also just wants to finish his chores quickly so he can test his new ability. Mash asks his mother if they will have another little sibling, but his father explains that it could be either a brother or a sister. Teresa comments that the kicks are very gentle, which gives her the feeling that, this time, it will be a girl. Rodden says that he already needs to start thinking about names, but Teresa reminds him that he promised she would have the right to choose the girls' names. While Teresa tries to think of a name, Alan notices that his magic points are being replenished again. He checks his glyph and sees a message from Me, the goddess of creation. By accident, he ends up reading the name out loud, which surprises his parents. Rodden immediately scolds him, warning that he should not take the Lord's name in vain. Derisha comments that Alan has been acting strangely all day. Alan quickly tries to cover it up, pretending ignorance, and blames the unfortunate timing and the developers for what happened. He then completely changes the subject and comments to his father that the scar on his arm is visible again. Rodden then explains that this happened because he overcame a test from the gods during the boar hunt that day. It is a special moment that occurs occasionally, usually when someone gets married, and it causes a sudden wave of energy that heals all wounds and removes fatigue. Alan pretends not to know anything, but looks excited, assuming that this is simply how it works. That is how the act of leveling up is described in that world. Rodden is a seasoned veteran in boar hunts, and even though Alan cannot see his statistics, he bets that his father must have a very high level. Despite his summoning skill having increased, Alan remains only at level 1 and has never defeated monsters beyond the weakest ones. In addition, servants cannot leave the village without permission, and the only exception is their own home. Because of this, Alan decides to ask to participate in a hunt, but his father immediately refuses, saying that the forest is no joke and that danger can cost lives. Alan does not argue any further. That night, he decides to check the grimoire again to reread Me's message. Although he already knows what it is about, After all, he had sent some rather toxic complaints, as expected. The defective text of the evaluation ceremony was finally corrected. The message also explains why his statistics appeared as E rank. This happened due to the slower level increase in Hell mode. As compensation, an attached file with the raw data was sent. Alan decides to analyze the attachment immediately and discovers that his true classification is focused on magic points and intelligence, which makes total sense for a summoner. He has the same number of A, B, and C rankings as Krina, so there is nothing to complain about. In the end, it seems like a fair reward for all the effort. Without wasting any more time, Alan decides to test the enhancements. He starts by improving Denka, and the skill immediately increases the creature's own statistics. Exactly as he suspected, the enhancements do not affect Alan's personal attributes, only those of the summoned creatures. To confirm this, Alan summons Denk. His appearance remains the same, although he is now clearly stronger. This shows that being a summoner is a great advantage. It is not just about summoning large and terrifying monsters, but about strategically enhancing the ones you already have. Alan is quite enthusiastic, but suddenly Teresa enters the room and panics when she sees Denka. Before Alan can stop her, his mother steps on the creature without hesitation. He begins to experiment with all possible fusion combinations, but realizes that he still has not unlocked a new type. The only remaining possibility is to fuse an F-class insect with an AB-ranked creature, also of F-class. When experimenting with fusions, he manages to create a new type of creature, a grass card, class F. Despite the initial disappointment, Alan realizes that it grants an increase in magic points. When he summons it, an apple with arms and legs appears, called a Po, whose aroma ability causes a plant to sprout that releases a pleasant smell. Later, Alan discovers that this aroma reduces the recovery time of his magic points, increasing his daily efficiency. Training with Krina, Alan loses as always, but she notices that he has become stronger. When consulting the grimoire, he confirms that his swordsmanship mastery has increased. Even so, he feels frustrated for not being able to evolve certain skills, insisting on repetitive training while trying to balance responsibilities with his family. At night, Rodden takes a long time to return and is soon brought back seriously injured after a boar hunt. He survives thanks to a rare herb and the gold coins received as compensation from the captain of the knights. Gerda explains that the accident occurred because unprepared commoners panicked, forcing Rodden to save them. Despite the severity, Rodden recovers and shows greatness by forgiving the one responsible. Feeling useless, Alan decides to stop pretending weakness and act to protect his family, fully investing in physical strength. Inspired by his parents, he tries to secure food for the winter using his summoner abilities, but ends up attracting a dangerous Albajaran, a rank B monster. Even with his evolved ability, Alan is defeated along with his summons and realizes the great disadvantage of losing the bonuses when summoning them, fearing that this might be his end. Closing episode 3. When he hits the ground, the protagonist understands that he needs to think quickly to get out of that complicated situation as soon as possible. Without wasting time, he decides to summon one of his monsters to assist him. By grabbing the creature by the neck, he realizes that he had never put this ability into practice before, but he notices that it works very well to drain energy. Observing more closely, he sees that the beast is already visibly weakened, the result of the great consumption of summoning power during the fight. Even so, this would not be a problem if he could just immobilize the creature that was in front of him. Then, he summons all of his remaining monsters to attack together, and, with a decisive blow, he finally manages to defeat the monster before him. When he looks at the book, he realizes that he received plus 100 experience. Soon after, he begins to celebrate, because he had defeated his first monster. This achievement leaves him extremely excited. Upon returning home, he takes with him the monster he has just defeated. Everyone begins to wonder how he managed to defeat an Albanes. The boy's mother asks how he was able to defeat that creature. He replies that it is a long story and that everything happened suddenly. The people around him become curious, trying to understand whether that was true. The boy's friend becomes very happy when she realizes that he is getting stronger and stronger. One of the men notices a wound on his cheek and asks if he was injured anywhere else. The boy replies that the bleeding had already stopped, so there was no reason for concern at that moment. The man asks if he brought down the beast using stones and a sword. Alan answers that yes. The old man, however, is surprised when he notices several marks that resemble wolf attacks. Alan makes up an excuse, saying that he fought purely on instinct and that he does not even really know how he managed to do that. Next, the man asks Alan for help. Together, they carry the beast to a more secluded place. The man explains that this type of creature usually weighs around 60 kilograms. Then, he explains that after removing feathers, blood, and organs, approximately 20 kilograms of meat suitable for consumption remain. In addition, the feathers also have good resale value. Alan becomes very happy when he realizes that his uncle is willing to teach him everything he knows. However, he explains that, even so, most of the profit must be handed over to the upper class. The 60% tax applies even to wild monsters. Then, he decides to show the boy something, opens the creature's body, and removes a stone, explaining that it is rank D. The man says that magic stones from monsters above rank D are also subject to taxation. He adds that, for the village, these stones have no use. Even so, he asks Alan not to continue hunting in the forest while his father is injured. Still, he gives him a tip. It would be possible to negotiate that bird with a higher-ranking chief. Alan approaches the man and talks with him at length. The scene then shifts to both of them in the royal capital. The man explains that the boy worked very hard to capture that beast, that all the feathers have already been handed over as tax payment, and asks whether the value of the meat could remain entirely with him. The other man asks him to wait a moment. He tries to harden the negotiation, saying that the Baron is demanding more and more meat, which causes almost everything to be taxed. Realizing that Alan was not an easy negotiator, he is impressed. Then, Alan also offers a magic stone. Both of them start an argument so that the boy could keep the stone, since he was still just a child hunting monsters. With few options, the man accepts and allows Alan to keep the magic stone. The boy becomes very happy, thanks him for the help, and realizes how skilled his uncle is at negotiations. Alan asks if, in the future, they could deliver only the magic stones and keep the meat. The man explains that if they always obtain magic stones, they will be able to keep the meat, wishing them good luck. After deceiving the fat old man, Alan decides to carry out a few more hunts. Using one of his frogs to draw the attention of the birds, he summons his monsters to drain the energy of the beasts, weakening them until the moment of the final blow. With stones, he strikes the creatures' heads and uses his dogs to finish the fight. After leaving the monsters disoriented, Alan delivers the final blow, eliminating them with ease. After winning, he feels very satisfied and orders his summons to return to the grimoire. When he opens it, he realizes that he has been hunting every 3 days since the first victory. But that was the first time he had not lost any summons in combat. Upon reaching 1000 experience, he finally levels up to level 2. The boy now has good skills, but his attribute increases represent only 60% of the expected total. He realizes that he is still not using the full potential of his abilities. Soon after, he ends up leveling up again and becomes very happy. After 6 years summoning creatures and going through so many hardships, he finally reached his first level. He feels fulfilled for having overcome a trial imposed by a god. Alan thinks that perhaps it is time to tell his family about his abilities. The scene changes to Alan arriving home with a huge monster, leaving one of his uncles shocked to learn that he defeated the creature alone. Later, he goes to train with his childhood friend. He reflects that he has already defeated 10 monsters and that his luck is improving. If he continues like this, there will be enough meat to get through the winter without worries. What is missing now is to trade part of the meat for firewood. Since there are many albatrosses in the region, he thinks about hunting more and, who knows, reaching level 3. He knows that this will be difficult before the end of the year. Distracted, he ends up being defeated by his friend during training. At nightfall, he decides to talk to his parents about his powers. Alan explains that he heard from an oracle when he was small that he was stronger and more intelligent than ordinary children. His mother asks if it was Elmia, and Alan confirms. However, he would also have to face challenges that an ordinary man would never face. The mother becomes worried about her son, His father, in turn, asks if he managed to overcome the trials of that day. Since the wound on his cheek had disappeared quickly, he explains that he himself had also gone through tests from the gods and knew that this would one day happen to his son. The mother asks about the evaluation from the previous year. Alan replies that he received a message from the goddess apologizing for the mistake. The father only asks that he show more respect. Alan apologizes and promises to be more careful. He explains that his attributes were evaluated as low because his tests have slow progression, and that his talent was considered non-existent because it was still too recent to be identified. The father asks if he has any talent. Alan replies that he still does not know, because he is very young and it has not manifested yet. The father becomes a little sad. In his thoughts, Alan apologizes for not being able to reveal his summoning talent. He fears that people would misinterpret it if they discovered that he can summon and control creatures. And, of course, he cannot tell anyone that he reincarnated from another world. The mother wraps him in a hug and says that she wishes he had told them all of this earlier. The boy's habit of throwing stones at trees every day and now facing giant monsters makes her ask if that was because of the Lord's trials. Alan apologizes for not speaking sooner. The father asks what he intends to do in the face of this. Alan explains that he wants to prove that he is worthy by passing the trials. In addition, he has always liked facing his problems head-on. The father understands what the boy means. Now he realizes that the goddess Elmia prepared this challenge especially for him. He knows that it is worth being accepted, and if he faces difficulties, he asks him to never hesitate to tell them everything. Alan thanks his parents for their support. The father asks that this story remain only among them, because he knows that telling this to other people could end up causing problems. Even so, he would like to tell Jerd, and the boy allows it. He knows that Jerd is always bragging that the girl is the sword lord and all that. Now he will be able to say that his son has a power comparable to hers. As time passes, winter finally arrives, and Alan begins to separate the meat to cut it. Suddenly, his uncle appears at the place, saying that he always knew that Alan was never an ordinary child. However, being blessed and tested by a god is another story altogether. He comments that this explains many things. The two head to the capital to sell part of the meat. The man asks if it is Alan's first time negotiating food, and he replies that it is, asking his uncle for help. The man decides to assist him. He explains that things work better when it is only among them, without commoners to get in the way. Alan asks what the real difference is between them and the commoners. The man replies that this is linked to their current social position. In addition, the 60% tax does not apply to nobles, because they pay in another way. He also explains that if a person has a child, nobles pay 1 to 3 coins, while commoners pay around 50 coins. Upon arriving at the shops, Alan learns to trade his meat for salt, sugar, vegetables, and other products. When he returns home, he is satisfied to realize that a bundle of dried meat was exchanged for enough firewood for 4 days. Now that he better understands how trading works, he can research more the next time he goes to the market. When he returns to the place, he asks the man how much it would cost if he paid with coins, and he replies that it would be 5 silver coins. In his mind, Alan knows that he cannot be a salt seller without having a salty attitude. When he enters a medicine shop, Alan asks if the man has any medicine that restores MP. The merchant replies that he does not deal with such expensive medicines. He explains that he only sells healing potions. Alan then asks if he has the Mueller's flour. The man replies that he does not, and that even if he did, he would not sell it. Alan asks if it was the same flour that Gerda bought. The man confirms, saying that she always enters the shop wanting the most expensive medicines. In addition, he comments that she is very clever. By always asking for the cheapest items, she ended up offering 3 gold coins and even asked to pay later. He says that she is more persistent than a child in a candy shop. The boy decides to give something to the man. He asks if he wants to trade it for anything. Alan replies that no, he is giving it as a thank you, because by selling that herb, he ended up saving his father's life. When he leaves the place, Alan meets a boy who asks what he is doing looking at his father's shop products. Alan replies that it is nothing and turns his back, but ends up being attacked. He draws his sword, and the boy runs away. but soon returns with a sword. Alan easily dodges and realizes that he is nothing special, being much weaker than his friend. A few days later, the father arrives home later and explains that the chief wants to talk to them. The man says that the chief wants to increase the number of boars delivered to the baron to something between 10 and 15. For that, they want common people to help as well this year. The mother thinks it is unfair since her husband is injured. He explains that the orders came directly from the baron. If they do not comply, they will hire more servants from other regions. Alan understands that if this happens, they will lose even more land. In addition, servants who do not know how to hunt may end up having their land taken away. This could completely change the nature of the village of Krina. To make matters worse, next year they want them to hunt 20 boars. The only way to achieve this is by increasing the hunting days to once every 2 days. Alan explains that if they increase the number of people working even more, they will continue getting injured. And over the years, this will become impossible. The final result would be recruiting new members. And the father knows that this is true. He asks if Alan thinks it is better to let the commoners help as well. And Alan replies that yes. The boy's uncle says that they are nothing but dead weight. Alan explains that he needs to find a way to make everyone useful. In addition, he has the wisdom that was granted to him. On the next day, everyone stands before a base, and thus the episode ends. Suddenly, they receive the news that the people have finally arrived. A sense of relief immediately spreads among everyone. The tension that had built up over the past few days almost completely disappears when they confirm that Rodden has managed to recover. Many let out sighs of relief, some even smiling for the first time in a long while. Rodden, still looking a bit worn out, apologizes for having worried everyone and assures them that, despite the incident, he is in great shape and ready to return to action. They then ask whether Alan will be going along this time. Rodden explains that, for now, they will follow the strategy devised by Alan, but that he will participate only as an observer. Alan agrees, saying that he does not intend to get in anyone's way. Even while trying to appear calm, the boy is visibly downcast on the inside. He truly wanted to go into battle and prove his worth, but he knows his father is extremely stubborn and will not give in easily. Although he recognizes that this decision is not good for his growth, he accepts the situation. At the moment, the most important thing is to ensure that the novices are properly trained, helping the group hunt more boars without risks. No one wants anyone to get hurt again. Shortly afterward, the people who had caused Rodden's injuries appear. Ashamed, they apologize, admitting that they were reckless and irresponsible. They say they do not want Rodden to worry about them, and even claim that, if a monster attacks them again, they would rather be left to die. Rodden reacts immediately, saying that he does not want to hear that kind of talk. He makes it clear that all he wants is for everyone to take care of themselves and reinforces that, whenever they need help, they only need to ask. Alan reflects that this was already his 7th year living as a servant. At last, the moment to leave the village was drawing closer. A small step forward, but an important one. Before him rise the White Dragon Mountains, imposing and shrouded in an almost mystical aura. Every autumn, the boars descend from the foothills of the mountains in search of food, becoming the main targets of the hunts. Legends say that a mythical white dragon lives hidden somewhere at the summit. Just thinking about it already excites the group, as if the very atmosphere were charged with fantasy. Suddenly, Alan is called to keep up with the group and not fall behind. The scene cuts to the battlefield, where everyone is already in position and ready to fight. A giant boar emerges from within the forest and attacks violently. In perfect synchrony, the group uses the giant sword to halt the beast's advance. Shortly after, Rodden's team appears from the rear. With a coordinated attack, they manage to severely wound the monster. Throughout the entire fight, Alan only observes attentively. It is explained that the method works as follows. The bait team lures the boar. The tank team keeps the monster in place. And finally, the attack team strikes its vital points. This is the method that his father and the others have used for more than 10 years, allowing for successful hunts even without special talents. Alan comments that it is almost time to attack and asks his friends to be ready to help. Even so, he feels a growing frustration at having to rely on weak people to hold anything on the battlefield. Soon after, they move into action. Rodden warns everyone to be careful and not to hit someone by mistake. Watching from afar, Alan knows that a single battle is enough for everyone to gain experience. Rodden then orders everyone to attack together, and the boar is defeated with a single devastating blow. Alan wonders if he gained anything from that. When he checks his log, he realizes that he did not receive any experience, which makes sense since he did not directly participate in the fight. Shortly afterward, the same boys he had trained appear, thanking him and saying that his advice made all the difference. Even so, in Alan's mind remains the frustration of having been only an observer, leaving a bitter taste of defeat. The next day, the group asks whether Alan will go hunting again. He answers yes, but adds that he would like them to ask his father for permission to use a spear. Everyone immediately refuses, saying that Rodden would beat them up if they dared make such a request. Without wasting time, Alan calls a friend to help him process the monsters that were already dead, properly cutting the parts and separating them. In exchange, he offers 2 packages as payment, and the man accepts without hesitation. Alan explains that those monsters are not part of the official reserves and that proper cutting is essential to sell the meat. He knows he needs to gather 50 gold coins to free his family from servitude. Taking everything to a city butcher would be far too expensive, so outsourcing the work right there is the best option, saving both time and money. He needs to make use of every moment. Later, the group discusses the possibility of forming 2 teams to capture even more boars. The scene cuts to them already inside the forest. One of them draws the monster's attention and runs to warn the others. Everyone gathers quickly and defeats the boar with a single blow. When he looks at his book again, Alan realizes that this time he gained experience. Before the fight, it is explained that his creatures can be summoned in any location he can visually mark within a radius of 50 meters. If the boar attacks one of these creatures, that already counts him as a participant in the battle. Anything goes when it comes to this. That is the mindset of a true hardcore gamer. The story advances 3 months. Alan explains that this world celebrates the beginning of the new year, and because of that, he was invited, for the first time, to the residence of the village chief, perhaps as a reward for having defeated 15 boars. Everyone celebrates the achievement, and he knows that, by keeping this pace, reaching 20 boars that year will be easy, all thanks to his plan to train the novices. During the celebration, someone notices a bottle behind Alan and believes it to be something special. He explains that it is a liquor he received from the chief. Everyone is impressed by something so expensive. Alan knows, however, that he deceived everyone with that lie. When they ask to drink the liquor, Alan agrees, but sets a condition. They must defeat him in a duel. If they win, the bottle is theirs. Otherwise, he wants permission to use a spear on the battlefield that year. Everyone is shocked when they realize they have fallen into the boys' trap. Even so, they accept the challenge and ask what the competition will be. Alan chooses an arm wrestling match. The first opponent, a large and strong man, starts out dominating, but Alan manages to turn the match around and win in the end. Next, he faces his own father. When he grips his father's calloused hands, he feels his crushing strength. Raid smiles, happy to realize that his son can already compete with him. But even so, he still wins with ease. Alan accepts the defeat, aware that the other man's power is between 150 and 200, rank D, while his father's ranges between 250 and 300, rank C. After drinking more than they should, Gerda ends up getting hit by his wife and is left hanging upside down, drawing laughter from everyone. Alan watches the scene and is impressed, realizing that she must also be rank C. The scene shifts to 6 months later. Alan clearly feels that his level has finally increased and receives a flood of new information. It is too much to process all at once, so he decides to calmly check his statistics page. In addition, he unlocks rank E summoning creatures. He will need to fuse them again to discover the final result. But now he has enough MP to experiment without restrictions. His card inventory has also increased, now able to hold 10 units. The bonuses granted by summoned creatures grow according to their level, so he imagines that he could receive a considerable boost if he manages to fill the inventory with 40 rank E cards. Thinking about that, he believes that he might now be able to defeat his own father in an arm wrestling match. Soon after, he realizes that he has acquired a new ability related to storage. Upon closer inspection, he notices that there is no level indicator next to the skill, which makes him wonder if it could be a fixed ability. While investigating, he notices the existence of an empty space, as if it were a hole. When he puts his hand in, he feels that it is extremely deep. Curious, he throws a stone and realizes that it does not hit the bottom. By concentrating more, he is able to mentally visualize the objects he stored in that space. After throwing several stones inside, he decides to test the limits of the ability and discovers that he can store anything that fits inside the book. He remembers that, in many games, item carrying capacity is an essential factor for player progression. Because of that, he begins to wonder if he received a divine storage ability at precisely that moment. Whether it is a key, a boat, or even a magic carpet, items tend to appear when they are truly needed. He feels that there is a greater reason behind this, something that will eventually require this ability. Next, he decides to test the rank E summons, but realizes that nothing happens. He wonders if perhaps he does not have enough MP, even though he has just recovered his energy. Shortly after, a message appears informing him that he does not have enough magic stones to create a rank E insect. Determined, he goes to his room and grabs all the money pouches he had stored. When he tries to use a stone, he receives another message and realizes that it still did not work. Then, he decides to use the storage ability. After throwing the stone into the space, he finally manages to perform the summoning and creates a butterfly. He spends some time playing with the creature, extremely happy with the result. Days later, he manages to create a saber-toothed tiger, which leaves him even more satisfied. Excited, he performs yet another fusion between creatures. The scene changes to the following day. As he looks around, the boy realizes that even small monsters can pose a danger to children. Turning to a friend, he asks for more details about magic stones. The friend explains that these stones are small gems located inside monsters, usually near the heart, and are mainly used to power magical tools. Magical tools are objects that function when they receive energy from these stones. There are many different types of them in the capital of the kingdom. Rank D and C stones have great value for the capital's residents, while rank E stones are practically disposable, often found scattered across the ground. Upon hearing this, the boy begins to look around and finds several of these stones. Alan decides that he will search for more in the surroundings of the village. After some time, he manages to gather many magic stones with the help of the villagers. Soon after, he imagines a situation in which several boars attack him, but together with his creatures he manages to defeat the beasts. However, he soon realizes that this is nothing more than a dream. When he wakes up, he concludes that each type of summon was created to fulfill a specific function in combat, such as attack, defense, weakening, healing, and detection. Thanks to this, he can single-handedly fulfill the role of an entire group of adventurers, which defines a truly efficient summoner. He also understands why he received the storage ability at that moment. Without it, it would be impossible to carry hundreds of magic stones with him. Now he believes he understands the intentions of the creators of this system. With an unparalleled army of creatures at his side, he feels that he can overcome any challenge and defeat any enemy. Thus ends another episode. As soon as they arrived at the noble's residence, they were received with a direct question: what did they want this time? They explained that, according to the new decision, the Baron would begin visiting the region every month. The master of the house was surprised by the news. Then they added that, in order to meet the requirements of the visit, it would be necessary to slaughter around 20 boars. He then wanted to know why they specifically needed Alan. The noble decided to clarify the situation. He said they needed someone capable of acting as the Baron's guide during his stay. They questioned why his own son could not take on that role. The man replied that Paloma's was not suitable for the task. Alan understood immediately. Deep down, he knew that it was true. He agreed without resistance. The noble explained that he expected Alan to help demonstrate hospitality, beginning with a dinner before the hunt. Alan realized that the intention was to entertain him and please him, perhaps even win him over with small courtesies. Even so, he made it clear that he would not be easy to manipulate. The noble had heard comments that Alan's ideas had contributed to the success of the hunts the previous year. He was confident that the boy would be able to handle that responsibility. In Alan's thoughts, however, he cared little about the Baron. The reality was that, as a serf, he did not have many options to leave the village. If he continued merely hunting boars and albatrosses, it would take at least 10 years to reach the status of commoner. The boy's father explained that, if he refused, there would be no problem. Alan remembered something important. The Baron had the authority to grant the title of commoner. That could be his chance to rise in the social hierarchy. After reflecting, he decided to accept the role of guide. On the day of the Baron's arrival, the city was restless. Nobles made a point of flattering him. His daughter, Sissel, was also present. The Baron thanked Deboki for the work carried out over more than 15 years to establish Krina village. Ever since the land reclamation decree, he said that, throughout the entire Grinvel fief, there was no greater example of success. He apologized for the confusion involving the boar meat. He knew that the extra request was troublesome, but he could not refuse a direct order from the king. The host was shocked to learn that the request came from His Majesty himself. Irritated, he blamed Viscount Carmel for having mentioned the hunts before the king. The butler advised him to calm down and taste the meal. Upon trying the dish, he was surprised by the flavor and asked what kind of meat it was. Not knowing how to respond, the host remained silent until Alan asked for permission to speak. He explained that it was a dish from Albahiron, prepared with meat slaughtered the previous day. They had used breast, thigh, and liver, seasoned with fresh herbs. The Baron asked whether the boy was the host's son. He replied that he was not, that Alan was a separate case. Someone at the table recalled that he was Rodden's son, the hunter. Alan thanked them for recognizing his face and informed them that he would be the guide on that occasion. The Baron was impressed by his manners and asked whether his father had been a knight. The host explained that he came from a family of serfs. Sissel showed irritation and questioned why they had allowed a serf to be present in the house. Her father immediately reprimanded her, asking her not to treat anyone that way. Even so, she continued to stare at Alan with displeasure. The Baron called the boy and asked whether he was prepared to present the details of the following day's hunt. Alan promptly agreed. The man explained that, if they did not reach the mark of 20 boars, his knights would take the front line. Alan realized that he did not fully trust the serfs. Cecil, on the other hand, became excited at the idea of seeing knights slaughtering boars. Alan apologized, but stated that 20 boars were a small number for them. Everyone was surprised to hear that coming from a child. He assured them that they would meet the target and that their performance would speak for itself. Before departing, the Baron asked Zinnov to take care of his son and keep everyone safe. Zinnov accepted without hesitation. At the camp, Alan indicated the hunting location and suggested that they climb the tower to observe the area. Cecil was impressed by the view. He explained that that was the forest where they faced the boars. Soon after, they were informed that the hunters had arrived. Alan commented that the armor being used had been produced from scraps of hide, bones, and tusks from previous hunts, and asked that they convey thanks for the authorization. On behalf of his father, Rodden, he explained that the strategy consisted of attracting the boars into the hunting zone. Speed was essential, which was why they used light equipment. He asked for patience, as it might take some time before the animals appeared. The Baron was impressed and remarked that he would send a tutor the following spring to help Alan study for the academy entrance examination. The boy understood, but he knew that, in the reality of Krina, studying was something distant. Suddenly, a man appeared running, chased by a boar. He and his group raised their shields to protect themselves. Then they used spears to wound the creature, and Rodden appeared to deliver the final blow. Everyone was impressed by the group's coordination. Even without great individual strength, they worked together and considered themselves worthy of being called warriors. Soon after, 2 boars appeared. Some suggested calling the guards, but Alan asked them to wait. He explained that the hunters were trained for that type of situation. In his thoughts, he believed that every creature lured in should be killed. Letting one escape was wasteful. However, in the past 10 years, he and his father had not managed to eliminate all the animals, mainly due to the lack of proper armor. 60% of the meat was collected as tax, and the remainder had to be exchanged for basic items. The spears were the only equipment they could improve. Even so, by mastering efficient strategies, they were gradually able to enhance their resources. After observing the difficulty of the confrontation, someone commented that 17 boars were still missing. Alan corrected them. Only 10 remained. 7 had already been slaughtered at the end of the previous year. He believed they would reach the target before the following month. The Baron was impressed and concluded that his knights would not be necessary. Alan gave thanks, imagining that his father would be pleased. Then he made 2 requests. The first was authorization to construct 2 shield walls. The Baron asked whether that was for the next hunt or already in preparation for the following year. He then asked if Alan needed anything else. As his second request, the boy asked for permission to acquire goods that were not available in the village, especially alcoholic beverages. He explained that he wished to trade them and allow their distribution among the servants. The man questioned the reason. Alan clarified that, with the increase in the number of boars being slaughtered, there was a real concern that the abundance of meat might reduce the value of the village's products. Exchanging part of the meat for imported drinks would help prevent a possible collapse in the local market. Furthermore, he emphasized that the hunters risked their own lives to be effective. The man understood. The drink would help keep morale high. He stated that he would consider the request favorably. Alan expressed his gratitude. Before concluding, the Baron remarked that they had been fortunate and advised them not to let it go to their heads. The scene shifts to everyone gathered before the man. He praises the group's hunting skills and states that great achievements deserve rewards. Otherwise, he would not be a good Baron. Then he announces that he will grant them the social position of commoner. In Alan's mind, excitement rises immediately. Now he will be able to hunt beyond the boundaries of the estate. He had dreamed of that moment countless times over the past years. His first destination would be the White Dragon Mountains, where he intended to hunt dragons. The Baron adds that all participants in the hunts over more than 10 years will also receive the same status. He asks them to identify those who have already worked for a decade. Afterward, he decides to return to the residence so that he may head back to the city and rest. He further explains that His Majesty wishes to promote the village of Krina as an example to the rest of the kingdom. For that reason, he asked how the boar hunts had begun. The Baron observes that it is a delicate matter and asks whether Rodden can recount what happened. It all began in the spring, 13 years earlier. Around 100 serfs from neighboring villages moved to the region to assist in developing the lands under the reclamation decree. After 6 months of hard labor, they had cleared a large portion of the forest. Autumn was approaching when disaster struck. A massive boar suddenly appeared and attacked, devouring most of the wheat and potatoes reserved for winter. Many of those serfs had gone to the frontier after suffering hunger in their former villages. Returning was not an option. It was then that Rodden took the initiative. He proposed that they hunt the boars to obtain meat. At that time, they did not possess the weapons, armor, or knowledge they have now. Even so, all the men united, using pickaxes and hoes as improvised weapons, and managed to bring down a single boar. The Baron is impressed by the account and states that they should be proud, for they united to accomplish an extremely difficult task. However, he reminds them that they lost a friend in the process. After defeating the boar, they overcame a trial of the gods and their wounds were healed. Yet their companion was not as fortunate. He has told Rodden many times that he should not blame himself, but he does not listen. At that moment, Alan finally understands why his father protected those commoners. He had already lost friends in that way. The Baron does not wish for such a painful memory to be revived. But he wants Rodden to understand something. Despite the losses, the village would never have prospered without his prudent decisions. He wishes to honor everyone's bravery with new rewards. Rodden then asks whether his son could work in the Baron's household. The man consults the butler about the existence of a vacancy. He replies that there is one. The request is then accepted. Alan, however, does not wish to work there, because he needs to take care of his summons and feels that he must find a way out of that situation. Even so, seeing his father so happy, he keeps his thoughts to himself. Upon arriving home, he bids farewell to everyone. He decides to have one last sparring match with his friend, and this time, he wins. He tells her that they will continue seeing each other often. His father asks him to work with dedication, for that is the first great opportunity of his life, and says that he places many expectations upon him. After the farewell, the story brings another episode to a close.